This conference will now be recorded.
Town Hall Workshop. Kelly, you can take the roll, please.
Commissioner Ayla,
Here.
Commissioner Hudson,
Here.
Commissioner Cassidy,
Here.
Vice Mayor Cos,
Here.
and Mayor Field.
Here. Can we stand for the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so we have workshop discussion items here. Is there any additions, deletion, modifications to it, which I think will happen as we go along?
I like that approach.
Yeah, so I mean, what I'd like to do is, by the way, the workshop is, public comment is not required. However, at the end, we'll have public comment if anybody wants to say anything about all the discussion items. So you can write them all down, Christine, and then, yeah, all right.
So we're not going to go public comment with each item?
No, we'd be here till like 6 o'clock at night. So it is a workshop. So at the end, huh?
We had that communication that came last week about the controversy down in,
Fayette.
Fayette. Are we going to talk about that here or?
I think with customary use, right? Would that fall into that category?
So it'll be under this agenda?
Mhm.
Under that, okay.
Mhm.
Sorry.
So we'll probably just stick with the,
Throw it in. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
all right. So is there approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying yay.
Yeah.
Yay. Motion carried. Thank you. All right, workshop discussion items. Now, is there any of these items that you see on here that, I mean, I suppose you all looked over the list. Is there any items that you see on here that you do not want to discuss?
Well, let me ask you a question.
Go ahead.
Number 2. That sounds like it's unto itself. And it's a biggie, right?
Number 2, redefine, clarify the role of P and Z to include architectural review, carried over. That is a biggie. Now, is that something we're discussing here regarding changes in the permitting process and town codes, or is that something, a whole larger issue with?
Well, I think if you look at Ken's email about reviewing architectural review practices, standards and procedures, including but not limited to massing, single-story homes and remodeling.
Yeah, wouldn't that be under the FAR discussion? This discussion here, I guess what you're saying is you're redefining and clarifying the actual role of the planning and zoning, which is going to be, I would think, a major discussion. So.
Did we ever get the architectural review put into the ordinances?
Mr. Mayor? Yes, that is, your planning and zoning board, when they do the development review for new development, they do engage as your architectural review board. So those criteria that you look at different things like the architecture, the massing, things like that, that's already in the code.
No, I was just looking specifically for the architectural review committee because I was on planning and zoning for quite a while and I remember all this stuff well.
It might have been before you were here. Yes, there was a huge discussion about the authority of the Architecture Review Committee within P&Z.
Understood, and I remember it well.
Yeah. So the question is, do we want to revisit that at this meeting? Because it's really an in-depth subject. And the previous struggle we had was the difference between codes and personal taste. Remember that?
Mhm.
So right now, the ordinance reads, if I remember correctly, we changed should to shall, but it turns out that legally should and shall mean the same thing. Remember this whole thing?
Sure.
So that's the question I'm bringing up. I think, at least in my case, I felt that the Architecture Review Committee was taking a little bit too much of their personal taste into consideration when somebody presented plans.
All right, so your suggestion is that we do this at a regular meeting or another workshop?
It's up to you guys. I mean, that's something that,
I mean, we have
It's
quite
gonna
a,
take a while.
quite a
Or
list
is it
on
something that planning and zoning should, work on amongst themselves and make recommendations? I mean, for instance, under architectural review, a massing study, that's something that I've looked into. If we could ask our planning and zoning to do a massing study, which is what Gulfstream is doing right now because of the very same problems.
yeah, but see, I disagree on that as well, because we have 36% FAR and 35% green space, which should deal with the massing issue.
35% lot coverage,
No, 36% FAR,
right?
35% green space.
Lot
lot
coverage,
coverage. Same thing.
opposite, 65% green space.
I think I'm right on this, because I went through this with Martin. Perhaps Christine could add in. Originally, we had it at 30 green space, and then we upped it to 35 2 years ago, I think it was.
Manny,
Anybody remember this?
I might be calling on you a lot. You may want to come up here. Or actually, you got your desk and everything set up back there. So. Well, you heard the disagreement here between 35% lot coverage and 36% FAR.
No, it's not a disagreement. Is it 35% lot coverage or 35% green space? I'm saying it's 35% lot coverage. We went through this with our ordinances.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, you can sit back there and do it. Whatever you want.
Okay, the question then is what then?
I believe 2 years ago, we said do a 30% green space, but we increased that to 35%. green
Correct.
space. Right. That's the answer. So there's 36% FAR, 35% green space. I don't know what this other 35.
Lot
So it's
coverage.
lot coverage.
Lot
That
coverage.
means what is 35% of the total lot, total square footage of the lot. The lot coverage is what's counted as anything that casts a shadow or basically building footprint.
Including outdoor patio edge that is roofed.
That are roofed, exactly.
All right, so we're
That's
both
lot
right,
coverage.
right?
Mhm. Okay. But back to the original question is redefine, clarify the role of P and Z. So that is actually defining what the role of P and Z is, not what we're handing it down to them to look into what we may want to change on the planning and zoning. Well, we're changing our ordinances. So you,
As a new person here, does someone want to state what the role of the Planning and Zoning Commission is as it relates to architectural review right now? That can't be that complicated. What, do they have
it is
the ability to
it is-
take a look?
I mean, Christie can,
I mean, at a high level, do they have the right to, even if something's within code, they can say no
Yes,
because they don't like the way it looks?
that's correct.
Okay, and so what's the wording that guides them in that?
you
Mr.
shall.
Mayor, if I may, so 6356 is your development plan review that P and Z engages in. That's when they play the role of architectural review board. And there's criteria that's listed in there that the Planning and Zoning Commission shall use the review criteria set forth herein when reviewing site plans. So this is the criteria when they sit in their quasi judicial role and they look at the proposed development to determine, does it satisfy these criteria? And that includes things like looking at its consistency with neighboring structures, the massing, architectural styles, things like that.
And architectural styles was one of the biggies, because we were negative on flat roofs. And then the Architecture Review Committee decided to change that as people were asked to build houses with flat roofs. Things like that.
More specifically, Steve, we came to planning and or the commission meeting, presenting that. And at that point, planning and zoning was directed to come up with a flat roof ordinance to allow people to do it. And then it was finally approved by the town commission. So it wasn't that planning and zoning made a rule, that rule was done by the commission. But
All right.
I brought that forward to the commission.
All right, so you can see how in-depth this can possibly.
Yeah, I think we ought to devote.
So this is
this
probably
later.
something we should take off of this and bring up another workshop, we can do another workshop and go, because it's going to take a little while to really hammer out the issues that we have and then send it. Actually, it's not really sending it down to P and Z, is it? Because at that point, we're making a decision on what their
Correct.
authority is or not.
I mean, given
So-
that the last time we did a workshop with P and Z, it was with a very different.
Well, we
planning
wouldn't be
zoning
doing it with P
and
and
a
Z.
very
We'd be
different-
doing it with ourselves.
But I'm saying maybe we should do it with P and Z if we're talking about what their responsibilities are.
We have the vice chair with us on the commission. Who was the
So
vice
no?
chair. You know my views on a combined workshop. Anyway, you can also, one of Mr. Khalil's ideas was having workshops with other P and Z kind of to see what their considerations are. But some of those are more strict than ours are. Anyway, so you want to move that one to another, we'll move that one, that we're all in agreement with that,
And
Leonard?
Same here.
Carolyn?
Yep.
Okay. All right, and also I think we should do is split these up in the sense of, let's put them all, let's organize it to where, say, like, the first thing we'll talk about is permitting issues. And then we'll move to construction issues. Because we go through, and then we can move to infrastructure issues.
As long as you read the number up, I'm fine with that.
You know what I'm saying, is that instead of going over each one of these and kind of bouncing all over the place, why don't we say, okay, let's start with, what are the ideas we're going to send down to P and Z for the permitting issues? And then we can just knock those off our list. And then the construction issues are stuff like parking ordinance, I guess a FAR discussion, which, oof, I want to touch that with 10-foot pole. But yeah, we can do that on those construction issues, stuff like that.
Okay. Maybe Lynn can speak to the permitting, because we've talked about this, being able to separate out things that should be more straightforward zoning permits.
Talked about this with Commissioner Cassidy. I know I've talked about it briefly with Christie several months ago. Communities that I've worked in the past have had what's called a zoning permit, separate from a building permit. That is for smaller things that don't need to go through the full zoning or for the full building process. Things like just installing a gate, some of your, lot clearing permits, things like that, that we normally have everybody go through. Major things for small repairs, windows and doors, as long as they're not making any changes to the structural size of the windows and things like that, that wouldn't necessarily need the building official to sign off if they're just replacing the existing windows and doors with same size. Breaking those into things that are approved with much less review, as opposed to the general building permits that we have now that covers everything from gates to lot clearing to AC emergency repairs, things like that. Several other communities also have a completely separate application that is for your emergency AC repairs, your emergency repairs, things like that. That they submit, when you submit that type of an emergency permit, they don't have to wait in most cases to start the construction for the full building review because it is considered an emergency. And all of their signed off paperwork, like the surveys and things like that, normally have to be submitted with a full building permit, aren't required until after they've finished the job.
Okay, so we're starting out with our permitting issues. Okay, so right now, that's a permitting issue would be to send down there to look at permits that are, should be basically 24-hour, 36-hour turnaround, that have no zoning issues, and they don't have to sign the handbook and all those procedures to get a fence put up, or a fence repaired, or air conditioner, or water heat, or whatever.
Correct.
All right, who's writing all this down to make sure that this goes to, in order, goes to the planning and zoning? Because we're gonna recording it, then we're gonna write it down? Okay.
So to that issue also, I was under the impression if like my air conditioner breaks down, I can call an air conditioning company, start the process, then come in afterwards and get the permit.
Right, but what they do is.
Just to clarify the system.
It's considered an emergency permit. They still notify us, but like I said, you don't have to submit all the paperwork.
But you don't even have to have submitted the permit to start the work if it's an emergency.
In most cases, they do fill out a form in other cities for that emergency.
No, I'm talking here.
Right, for here, we haven't had anything, so, yeah, I mean, but it's nice.
So
to know
that's
when
part
work is
of that
going on.
discussion.
That's part of that.
Yeah, that's part of the
They have
discussion.
24 hours to turn it in from the time.
Who's speaking?
Yeah.
Kelly.
All right.
So
What about
are
a
we
roof?
addressing 14 or 13 here? 'Cause-
Well, that's what, give me a second. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, so 13 would be next, permit fees.
So we just dealt with 14.
We just dealt with, well, there's maybe building permit process changes. Yeah, is there anything you want to add to that? Number 14? Anybody?
Well, we talked about also that it kind of ties into fees though, because when you have to pay your full permit fee upfront and then wait another 30 business days plus to actually physically get your permit. And what we talked about is maybe paying a review fee upfront, but you don't actually pay your tens of thousands of dollars for your building permit until you pick up your building permit.
For what type of permit?
New construction, for
All
example.
right, so new construction, you can already come in and say, I want a permit review process fee, and you pay $250?
Well, that's for the meeting, the $250. For the meeting with officials, you come in with your plans and a review on all that, tell you if it's going to work or not.
So say you have a house, you want to make sure it might work out, you can actually come into the town and meet with the town officials and the building officials for $250 process, they'll go over with you and say, this is going to fly or it's not going to fly.
Right, but what Carolyn's talking about and what we've discussed is that's for your development plan review before it goes to planning and zoning.
Okay,
Once it's done through planning and zoning and they submit the final plans for permitting, in our building permit fee, we have already rolled in the review costs of having the building official, the zoning official, the engineer, Boynton Beach Fire and the health department sign off on those final plans. But that also has you pay all of those review fees plus your actual permitting fee at the same time you submit everything. So what many communities do is they have a set review amount at the beginning, once you've submitted your plan for everybody to review. And once all the reviews are done, then they pay the actual permitting fee, which is the larger, significantly larger amount, which is based on the cost per
And is there a
construction.
lag between that time period?
There
Yeah.
is, because you don't pay the permit fee until you come to pick up the approved permit.
Right, but now you have generally been approved. Now, can you come in the next day and get your permit?
No,
No, because there are
Like-
it
review,
takes 30 business days plus.
So that's what you're trying to change?
Yes,
Right,
if you're
good.
paying
Yeah.
$50,000 and then have to wait basically 2 months to get your building permit.
So this way you go through the review, the pre-review, I guess we
Yeah.
call it. And then after everyone says, yeah, this looks pretty good, then you pay your permit and start.
well, no, I think you should
Right.
pay something up front.
you
So-
Yeah,
you
the
pay
review
pay the review fee.
Right,
And then once everybody's signed off on the reviews, all the comments have been addressed, and the permit is ready to be issued, you contact the property owner, the contractor, and say, okay, your permit is ready to be picked up. Your permit fees are whatever they are. That includes the DCA and all of those. And that has to be paid when they pick up the permit.
and what usually is the percentage of that? Manny, what's usually the percentage of the permit fees on a review fee on other towns? Or Mike? Because I know that some do it differently. Some we gotta pay up front, some it's only 50%, and then when you pick up your permits, the other 50% when you pick up the permit. Is there a standard?
Most of the towns I work in, the fee is paid up front before we start reviewing.
All up front?
For a permit application,
I don't think you heard your
Yeah.
question.
yes, it's paid up front.
So there you go.
Can I ask a question? What's the problem we're trying to solve here? Is someone feeling that it's unfair that people pay too early or something like that? They're paying like 30 days too
Yes.
early?
There are a
Yes.
couple of different problems to solve. One, every year when we do close out the books, any permit that has been fully paid for, as in building fees, but has not been issued and picked up, we have to account for those funds across 2 years now. So we have to encumber a portion of those into the next year as revenue. And we have to go through every permit that has been submitted and issued a number to determine where they are in that process. Secondly, there are times, and fortunately, they haven't been as many in the last 6 to 8 months, where a project decides not to move forward after they've submitted and paid their permitting fees. And then they have to come back and ask the commission for a refund of those permitting fees. And it becomes a complicated calculation of how much of that is what they should get back, how much was actually used in review fees, how much, that type of thing. So if a person submits for a project and ends up canceling the project, they're not out any more than the review fees in advance, and they're, basically the town's not holding their money, waiting until we can decide on issuing a refund.
We've also had the issue of people who think that they've paid it up front, they've got a permit number, they're good to go. And so they go without the actual issuance of the permit.
So you speak up a little bit.
Sorry. So they think because they paid it in full, they've got a permit number, they can go ahead and start. And so I've had that a few times. And so,
Well, that's just, I mean, any general contractor knows that you can't just start without a permit. And if they do, that's just, you shouldn't be a general contractor. But if no other town does this, why are we doing it or trying to do it?
In my conversations with the other towns, they do. They do
That
this.
was my understanding as well.
I don't know if Mike and Manny understood your question.
Mike, did you understand my question?
The full permit fee is paid up front before anybody does anything. That's Jeff's question.
Before they've been approved.
To start the process.
Perhaps Steve Barker can speak to that.
Word itself.
That thing on? That microphone on?
They pay up front.
Steve wants to say something.
Yeah.
Well, they're public comment. We know what they do. All right. So it's a pleasure of the commission. You guys do whatever you want.
I like
They're
Carolyn's.
doing a review, and then they say, oh, I'm not gonna do the project. And they did all the reviews.
But they paid for the
They
review.
paid- yeah,
They paid for that.
He's not understanding the question. I agree with what Caroline's
Mhm.
proposing, and Lynn, it seems to agree with what Caroline's proposing. It simplifies life for everybody, including the officials.
Including bookkeeping.
Right.
So what is your percentage that you're thinking about?
What is a review fee? I mean, we talked like $5,000? Or it depends on the project?
it depends on the project, it could be anywhere from, I don't know, like $50 up to $200, $250. It just depends on how much the cost of the project is.
Where you say $50 to $200?
Depending on what the price of the project is. If you get a low project, it's like, $2,000, $3,000.
If I'm building a house, it's only $250.
House is different.
No, I'm just talking about, we're just talking about new construction right now,
New construction.
okay? We're not talking about water heater, air conditioner, any of that. So we're talking about new construction. That's correct, right, Carolyn?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
New construction. So new construction is going to cost a lot more than, it should be at least 20, 30% of the total permit. I would,
I'm saying, I want to say it's around, depending on what it costs, it's something around 1,000.
how much?
Around 1,000 or so.
So why don't we just tell P and Z to sort this out, because it should be a percentage.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So that's what you send down to planning and zoning. What percentage of the permit fee should be used for review process?
Yeah.
And is it a good idea to actually do what we're,
With the goal being that
Yeah,
there
good.
would be no refund if they decide not to go forward with the project. Right?
Because they
That's the
don't-
big issue, is the carryover of the refund.
right?
So
Yeah.
that's easy.
Okay,
All right.
next.
What do you got? Anything else? Okay, so nothing else on the building permit
Well,
process?
what's this, including an surety bond or
I have
LLC?
got-
I asked that. So it was brought to my attention, someone doing new construction in town, they had to put up a letter of credit during the demolition. When they finally got it back, after it was over a year, whatever it was, they had $12 of interest on it. Like where does that money go when the town is holding it?
A letter of credit?
Well, what would have been, I'm talking about a specific property on North Ocean. They were just couldn't believe that they got their money back with $12 of interest.
Well, with a letter of credit,
Were
The
they mad because they got $12 more? Is that what you're saying?
No, because what their point was the town was sitting with this money and didn't do anything with it.
Well,
letter.
We're not
credit,
supposed to do
holding
anything
any
with
money.
All right,
Letter
well,
of credit, we're not holding any money. We're
Right.
holding the actual letter, the money's at the bank.
Yeah.
So if they only got 12% or $12 worth of interest, their bank didn't do anything with that money they were holding. Or they didn't read the full instructions for the letter of credit in terms of what that money would earn while it was sitting there.
all right.
anything else on that? Anything else on the permit fees or building permit?
What is
process?
generally, what is a permit fee? It's a percentage of the overall project, right? 1%? What is it? For new construction. I didn't see it on that schedule, that's why I'm asking.
Does P and Z out there in the audience know the answer to this?
Mandy, do you know the answer what the permit fee schedule is? Okay. Well, I guess I mean, you can find that out. I mean, do we need to revise our permit fee schedule?
If we remove the review fees, most likely, building permits, for a job less than 1,000, the permit fee is 100, between 1,000 up to 3,000, it's 150. Jobs over 3,000 up to 100,000, it is $150 plus 2.5% of the amount between 3,000 and 100,000. Over 100,000, it is 150 plus 2.5% of the amount exceeding 3,000 up to 100,000 plus 2% of the amount greater than 100,000.
Okay, so the biggest thing we're concentrating on changing is the turnaround process for repairs and not having to book the booklet and everything else. However, if it's over $2,500, you're still going to have to pull a notice of commencement. Okay, so that's another item you want to make sure that the planning zoning goes over. There's a certain threshold that you pass as well. But go ahead.
I was saying for the building process, I still had a couple other issues on my memo.
Okay,
That's 14.
that's 14. I thought you had an established time for avoiding the permits. We don't?
No.
I thought it was 6 months. They don't have an inspection in
That's
6
once
months?
it's issued. That's once it's
Okay.
issued, not while it's still in the review process. We'll have permits that are being reviewed, haven't been issued. That people will stop communicating, they won't respond
that's
to
like the-
comments, and then, 10, 12, 15 months later, they'll
Well,
finally
You
respond.
mean the applicant?
The applicant, yeah. the
Yeah, what they,
applicant contact.
okay, and they're talking about Island Drive house. So what they
But
do,
not
they
just Island Drive,
answer.
but other houses.
Right, but that's a good point you brought up. You need to make sure this goes down there to the planning zoning as well. There's got to be a process to where there's amount of time, what they do, they answer the review process, but they'll only answer one of the review questions, which starts the whole process back over again, which gives them another 6 months. And they can stretch the job out for, well, I think that's 2 years the thing's been sitting over there. So that is a very good point. And then when we actually should be, the wording should, when we think the permit's been abandoned. And then we can void the permit and send them a letter. And then we can send them a letter at that point, right?
Aren't there two things here? You're talking about voiding the review. In other words, the review sends back some questions, right?
Mhm.
And you have X number of days to answer those questions. You don't. So the review is now voided.
Yeah, but see what happens
Then
though.
the permit is
But they'll
another,
answer like one of the review questions,
right?
which gives them another length of time.
Well, no, we just stop that.
Well, that's what we're talking about now doing.
But then there's also, if you get a permit, you pass the review, you pass the permit process, then that's a separate issue. Now have a permit and you're actively working on the house and you just stop. Don't we have something in place that says 2 years? You got to finish it?
The Florida Building Code says
6 months, yeah,
6
for
months
inspection.
for an inspection.
We have a local duration.
It's at the discretion of the building official if this project is just lingering on or has been abandoned. He has the authority to void the permit or pull the permit as issued.
Wow.
Have we done this
If
lately?
it's brought to the building official's attention or.
Well, we just did that on the Island Drive house
And
with
we
Mike.
discussed that with
Yeah.
the contractor
Mhm.
or the property owner on this project, that it appears to have been abandoned or just being elongated, for whatever reason. He has the authority to cancel the permit after he's done his 180 days.
Thanks, Manny.
So what are we asking P and Z on this?
We're asking them to look at the process of the review process and how fast the review has to come back.
Yeah.
We're looking in the process of when we consider a permit that's abandoned. And when the building official had, can basically go in there and tell them, look, we're writing you a letter telling you, if you don't complete this permit by a certain amount of time, then the permit will be null and void. And we'll have to start all over again with new fees.
Thank you.
So Mr. Mayor, just a point of order.
Thanks.
When we say, okay, we're going to send this down to planning and zoning, does that mean that we expect them to take action at their next meeting and then report back to us on this, or?
Well, it's going to take a few meetings for them to do all this, but yeah, what they'll
So we
do,
want to give them a deadline?
they're going to bring back to us their suggestion, hey, this is what we think you guys should do.
Okay. It seems like it wouldn't be a bad idea for us to give them an expectation as to when we'd like to have these different issues resolved, just so that we don't have to have the same meeting next year, talking about the same stuff.
I've got just one question. You say that you can present the permit holder with a list of things, and if he or she does just one of them, it starts the clock over. Can we just say that consolidating all those things at one time so we can avoid that?
Well, that's it. So that would be the planning and zoning suggestion back to us to do.
Okay.
Yeah, because you're sending it down them to compile an idea, that
Could-
idea.
could-
Our idea
could
is,
we
hey,
give them
we
direction?
want you to change this because it's being abused.
Could we give them direction in doing that?
I think that would be a good direction.
That's good direction.
Okay. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that take 13 off the list, man?
Takes 13 off the list.
Yeah.
All right.
14's off the list.
And there was one thing on 13 I was looking at, and that was dogs on the beach, which is toward the end.
Where?
Page 4 in the, under item 13.
Oh, okay.
And there's no fee listed, there's no code section. And we currently give them a warning for $25, and then it goes up. And I'm just thinking maybe we should start a little bit higher and increase it.
Actually, for those that don't have the fee in the code section, if you look at the previous page, it says, for the violations listed below, the first offense is a warning or a $25 citation,
Oh, I see.
second is a 50, and third is 100. But I do know that we've talked about making changes to,
So if we change
Some of
one,
that.
we'd have to change them all?
no, you wouldn't have to change them all, you'd just remove that from this section and change the,
Hey, maybe I bring that up at the regular town commission meeting. We can make the decision right then and there as an agenda item.
Sure.
So put it on the next town
Yeah.
commission agenda. Sure.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so sign ordinance permit. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the construction.
Where are you?
Anything else on the
Which
permitting?
numbers? I'm going by numbers, Jeff. Which numbers?
Pick one. How about the, well, that's probably the infrastructure. Updating trees, parking ordinance related to construction, on-street parking, that'd be
What number?
construction.
Well,
What
That's number 6.
6. One of the things I talked to Fields about is in Palm Beach anyway, they have, for any new construction site, they have to submit. We ask people to have contractors to have a staging for vehicles plan, but we don't require it in writing. We don't hold them to it. So could we require staging plan, basically, for construction vehicles.
Well, you could do one better. You could actually require a right-of-way permit. So what happens is that, like if you're talking about Palm Beach and a couple other towns, what they do, they call it a right-of-way permit, and you're allowed to, you pull a permit for the back, you can park on the street, but you can only park at certain times and only a certain amount of vehicles, and you have to renew it every single 30 days. So it'd be something they could look at and look at how other towns do it. Staging wise, I don't know. I mean, they could look at staging, why not?
Yeah.
Depending on the size of the project too.
Right. Well, just thinking of what we just lived through with the Pyramid House.
Yeah, Mrs. Kramer was very specific.
Mhm.
Wait, what else we got?
So we're going to ask planning and zoning to look at that.
Yes. All right, what about walls fronting the right of way to include landscape requirements, permissions on the exterior side?
Which number?
Number 1.
Yeah, I like this. I would think that would be a good thing for P and Z to take a look at.
Yeah, I do too.
I told you my personal story. I landscape my wall.
Yeah.
So the town doesn't mow the grass on A1A at my house. The 2 neighbors to the north did not landscape their wall, so the town does mow their grass. So I asked why. You know why? Because I landscaped. It's nuts.
So what do you want to do?
I think
Pass an ordinance that we pay
I think
steep
it's an
costs for
improvement to the
putting stuff in
town
there?
to have a hedge or greenery, and you guys might disagree, on the outside of the wall that's facing A1A. In most cases, it's facing A1A.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, that's the planning and zoning right up their alley.
We do currently have some regulations in place under 64-44 D, additional landscaping requirements in any location where a fence or a wall is placed along or parallel to an improved public right-of-way, roadway, or waterway. The following additional landscaping requirements shall apply. Not more than 50% of any wall, fence, or hedge shall be within 18 inches of public right-of-way, and at least 50% of the linear distance of such wall or fence shall be landscaped using plant materials and standards as provided in Article 4, Landscaping, Chapter 66 of this code. Notwithstanding any other requirement of this land development code, such landscaping shall be shown on the site plan furnished to the town for permitting. So perhaps what the P&Z needs to consider is if that language is strong enough, or if you want to put in language that says that it's designed to basically
Lynn, can I ask you a question?
hide the wall.
The Pyramid House has a utility box there, and they've now put a fake greenery in front of it, which isn't even the same color as the real greenery. Does that meet the current requirement? Because if it does, then I don't like the current requirement. I don't think it's good.
Well, the current requirement, I mean, yes, it does, in part because that's not their, it's not their transformer, and the FPNL, when I've spoken to them, requires that one side be, that front side be left open, basically unfenced in or unplanted around on their edge. So they put something up as a temporary. Now, they have hedges that are planted on the outside of the wall. And that's where I think it might be what the commission is looking for, is if you've got a wall, not just to landscape it, but the idea is that the landscaping is meant to
Beautiful.
beautify and
For the rest
create,
of the residents, not
Right,
just
and
for the owner.
create a,
And I would throw one caveat in there. If you don't have landscaping, we're not trying to force people to go put in landscaping. This would be new construction.
right.
Okay.
But just something that says that the landscaping must grow to a height to, sort of obscure the wall or something like that. Is that, not just beautify, but are you going to want to see the walls, depending upon what somebody's wall like, or do you
I
want the
would be
landscaping to
careful in
obscure
saying
it?
you have to plant things that totally obscure the wall.
Well, that's why I'm saying like a percentage obscure. That way, you could
I
plant.
think P and Z should figure that one out.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can figure that out.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Mhm.
All right, so that's number 1. All right, the next one on construction would be seawalls. I also have something on seawalls as well. Seawalls, what they need to look at is clarify the code on the distance of the dock from the seawall. So you have to clarify wherever the property line is in relation to the width of the seawall in relation to the width of the dock. Okay, so the reason that I explained, when we had our prior building official, he was saying wherever the property line is, starts your 5 feet. Well, most, if not all, the seawalls in town, the property line is the beginning of the seawall, the inside of the seawall. And you have 3 feet of cap. And then you start your 5 feet. So then he was saying, well, that's not the way I'm interpreting it. I'm interpreting that you have already 3 feet. So you're only gonna be able to put 2 feet of dock, which is ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
So that needs to be clarified in the code.
But I think also we're talking about seawall height.
Right, that's the next one. Go ahead.
And what Shields is recommending is that it be 5 feet up from 3.9 feet. When building a new seawall, when a seawall is in significant disrepair, or when the property owner has been cited for tidal flow breaching the seawall and impacting a neighboring property or right of way.
Well, what if it's an older house that needs a new seawall? If you make 5 feet, it's gonna be higher than the finished floor elevation.
Protecting the house.
That's definitely a planning and zoning debate.
We did provide a copy of the ordinance passed by Gulfstream.
That was maximum height though.
Right. But that is something I think P and Z also should look at, the maximum height. In part because if you have somebody coming in and building a new seawall next to two existing seawalls, and they bring in and say, put it at 7-8 feet, and the adjacent seawalls are down at 4 or 5, the seawall needs to, property needs to make sure that there's a proper, gradation down to the lower elevation.
Maximum height is what they plan and zoning should look at, maximum height of the seawall. If
And
there is a
and
maximum.
minimum, yeah.
Maximum and minimum.
Okay,
Once again, we're talking new construction, new seawalls.
Correct.
Well, yeah.
Or repair of damage.
Or when it's in
I
significant
would say
disrepair.
Not repair.
That would be touchy.
well, if
Well-
it's significant disrepair, if you're replacing a seawall, you're replacing a seawall. But I guess, again, this is their debate, but if you have an existing seawall that's it doesn't have a cap on it yet.
Mhm.
And your house, like I say, is at 6 elevation. And your minimum, you say now is gonna be 7, I'm looking at a foot of seawall. So
Mhm.
now my seawall is higher than my house.
Well,
So you say it's too bad?
And also, what if you're repairing a crack in the seawall?
That's a whole different
Right,
repairs.
that's what
We're talking about new
So-
rebuilding the
Correct.
seawall.
So this is something that P and Z should do.
Yeah.
So the
Correct.
directive is
To look into the minimum and maximum height of the seawall, new seawall.
It seems to me that there was a approved design on a house on the north end of town, and they had a little bit of seawall, and it was lower than the adjacent seawalls, and they were debating whether they had to bring it up or not, and I can't remember how that worked out, but I think they were required to, does that make sense? I think,
well, isn't
because
there,
it was an old seawall, it was really low, flooded.
All right.
Nancy, real quick. There was also discussion, I remember one of the planning and zoning meetings where they wanted to possibly regulate or make it to where any new builds or remodels are required to build this new seawall, a higher seawall.
Well, isn't it into the substantial 50%? If you're doing a remodel, it depends on how much of the remodel you're doing, isn't it? So if you're adding in a room, are you gonna have to redo your seawall? I think that should be if it's over a certain percentage, you have to redo the whole house as well.
Are you willing to meet that requirement?
No.
Or look at the requirement for doing it like a new build? Or have them look into it, I should say. Is that how you understand, Christie, is what they were talking about?
But I think it's something that P and Z would have to study, because I think you're right, is it, you know, based on what the development is. Based on what the development is, you know, looking at because I know another issue on today's agenda is the whole 50% rule. So if someone hits the 50% rule with a remodel, does that now require them to redo their seawall and increase the height if a minimum height is required?
Put that on their list. That's a good one.
And am I mistaken in that there is a property at the north end of town where the seawall is low and the water continuously breaches the seawall and affects the neighboring properties? And they are under code enforcement now?
As I recall, there was a property that there was concerns that they had a deteriorating seawall and water was infiltrating and affecting another property owner. But I believe it was inspected and it wasn't determined that that was the cause.
So on a tangent, Lynn, can you put that in your notes? I want to revisit that outside of this meeting with the property owner, you, and I don't know if it's Mike or Manny that looks at seawalls. Because the property owner would like whoever does this inspection to actually use his boat to look at the seawall from the canal. Because when you look at the seawall from the house, you can't see the damage and the fact that it's in total disrepair. It's nothing to do with this meeting.
All right, so let's move on. Drainage issues is the next construction, number 7. Develop a master drainage plan for the town of Champlain Road and drainage improvements needed to manage current and future drainage issues.
Is that a
Would that be,
P&Z?
that's not a P and Z
Yeah,
thing,
it's
yeah.
not a P&Z. We already have a swale
Yeah.
ordinance.
All right, I'd like to add one.
Are we striking 7?
Striking 7.
Well, wait a minute. P and Z does look at drainage issues, and that was a big part of the review process.
Do you look at town drainage issues?
The
or
master
site?
drainage plan?
Site, and I'm mistaking.
Right,
town with
but
site.
this is not site.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that.
That'd be something that we could do
I'll have another.
through a town engineer. I like to have the planning and zoning look at outdoor spaces to the rear of the house. In the sense of outdoor barbecues, pergolas, things of that nature, to increase the availability of homeowners to utilize more of their backyard. Because right now, I think we are not allowed any permanent structures within 25 setback. So no outdoor kitchens, no pergolas, nothing, unless they're removable.
Can I ask a question in reference to that? Now, setbacks are, you're allowed to have a wall or engineer would have none. Who did that to the setbacks? Now, the outdoor kitchens have, some of these outdoor kitchens just have a wall and they have a countertop. There, for clarification, I think we should make sure that here, what is considered a structure as far as lot coverage to, for the encroachment into the setback? Because some of these outdoor kitchens don't have, they have like canvas and stuff, but there's nothing there that's permanent other than the countertop and that wall that supports the grill or so forth.
Yeah, like basically a certain amount of square footage, 50 square feet or something like that. You'd make a rule of how big it can be and what it can have. You know? Do we want to revisit turf, artificial turf?
I think we need to revisit just one part of it. If you remember correctly, anyone that had artificial turf in their front yard would have to remove it within 10 years. And I think that's just going to be, in 7 years from now, a lot of lawsuits. So I think that should just be voided. I don't know who voids it, P and Z.
All right, so P and Z can look at turf. All right, so
What number are we on?
What was
we're
Just the other stuff.
spitballing right now, yeah.
Okay.
So we have the pergolas, we have barbecue, I think we should relook at deck setbacks, because right now they're 5 feet. And with the code already says we have to have a permeable area of so much. So why are we saying, okay, it's at 5 feet? They're gonna have to make sure they have a permeable area anyway. So if the permeable area on the lot is X, has to be X, and they covered that, and why not be able to have we used to have the 3 feet, which actually we had originally it was 0. So I don't know why they got moved to 5 feet, which is kind of excessive, and especially for if we're not gonna do anything with the FAR, and we're not gonna, change setbacks, how do you increase the value? Increase the value by letting people do certain other things on their property. So it increases investment in the town. So I think deck setbacks are a big issue, not a big issue, but an issue they should look at.
So just to clarify, you're wanting to look at reducing?
Actually either reducing or eliminating the setback, and they can play with it any way they want because of the permeable-ish area that we have to already have. It's already in the calculation of when you're building the house.
So you're saying a deck attached to a house, like if it's
No, like-
abutting the side setback right up against a neighbor's property, that you think that should be okay?
Believe it or not, 10 years ago, that's the way it was. So then we went to 1.5 feet, then we went to 3 feet, and now we're at 5 feet. So you can't put your pool deck within 5 feet of your property line on the side. Which I think is excessive. So. All right. Do you want to tackle this 50% substantial improvement for AE flood zones? That's under construction. Number 9.
Sure.
Yes.
We're going to take public comment after.
On the drainage plan and stuff, we hadn't, about 3 years ago, I submitted a petition for the Tropical Drive residents to see about putting stopgap measures to prevent flooding when the power goes out, the backup goes out.
Okay, so we're going to take public comment after.
Okay.
Okay.
So on this 50% rule, maybe
Thank you.
Christie could clarify. I'm under the impression that there was a 50%, let's call it a mandate, that was never absorbed. But the municipalities could decide what triggered 50%.
No, it's in the Florida Building Code.
No, I'm asking Christie.
There's 2 separate 50% rules that issue. There's the one in the Florida Building Code, and there's the one in floodplain management. Your building official is the deciding administrative official for both of those issues.
Right, so see what my point is? We define what 50% is
Well,
on the flood aspect of it.
yes, but keep in mind, what's involved in that determination is also governed by FEMA and also dictates your CRS score or your flood insurance discounts.
Right, but that's a homeowner's problem. So what I'm getting at is, let's say I'm renovating 45% of my house. The town agrees it's 45%. The contractor then comes and tells me, by the way, Steve, you need a new roof, a replacement roof, not an additional roof, a replacement roof. We then throw that on top of the 45%, we get over 50%, and that changes the entire ballgame. If I decide to go from regular windows to storm windows, which should not be considered part of 50%, that is added in to the 50%. So I think we need, as a municipality, to define what is included in the 50%. How do you reach 50%?
That's precisely why I asked this question. Because why can we have some discretion in not including a roof that you must replace for insurance purposes or windows that
Or
you,
windows.
right,
Or you change your
or
front
air
door.
conditioning?
There was a guy that
because
got caught out changing his front door, remember that?
Yeah.
So he was at 48% and he decided to change out his front door, not enlarge it, and that pushed him over 50%.
Mayor?
I do believe there are exceptions for life safety issues that don't get counted towards your 50%.
Mike?
Okay. To me, I mean, the code says there's an existing building code, okay? It says repair, reconstruction, or renewal of any part of an existing building for the purpose of maintenance. or to correct damage. So an AC change out to me is maintenance. A new roof is maintenance. I can't see, you put $100,000 roof on and you have to raise your floor elevation, that doesn't make sense to me. But if you're gonna do a whole project and then the roof is in there and all these other things, then that's a different issue.
And what about mold remediation? Like if someone had to replace their drywall because of mold? That's life safety also, right?
Yeah, you're not gonna make you raise your house because you got mold.
So what's the difference between having a building official who has common sense and one that didn't have common sense?
Yeah,
Well,
that's-
exactly.
So,
But see, I differ from what I'm hearing. If I'm building, let's say I'm renovating my house, right? And as part of that, I'm gonna put a new roof on, and that's part of the plan, right? But I'm not changing the house, right? Why is that gonna count towards my 50%? All I'm doing is maintenance while I'm doing the construction project. So I'm just asking that P and Z define what makes up 50% of a renovation. What is included in that?
I think we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
It's a re-roof. So to me, that's a maintenance. You have to do it. And you might have to put 5 roofs on your house by the time you're all said and done. So you're gonna have to add those up all.
Well, the previous building official would count that roof.
that's the problem.
That's the problem. So, and he would point to codes.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, what I would like to direct the P and Z is to define what is included in 50%. That's all.
Not substantial improvement. It's
Maintenance.
maintenance.
Yeah, but I think Steve's saying if at the same time someone's doing a renovation, they're also doing a needed re-roof,
I would not.
you shouldn't count that.
I
Right,
would not count that.
exactly. But I
Right,
want
but
to
see,
clarify.
but the problem is we may not have you for,
Yeah, you might not be the guy.
so
You could have
to define it clearly would be the way to
You
go.
have to change them out, so then you have to raise your floor elevation because you have 5
Correct.
seats.
The previous building official pointed to codes on the book that triggered the 50%.
The code is, to me, is always not black and white.
But I just think we need it clarified by P and Z. Maybe P and Z will read the code and say, you know, that previous building official misunderstood the code, or maybe they'll say we need to tweak it.
Well, in chapter 1, in the definition, it says the intent of the code. is to perform all these things. Intent.
We put in as intent.
The intent of the code.
Thank you, Mike.
All right.
All right, next on construction, I don't have any more on construction. Anybody else, anything more on construction you want to add? Let's see here, review code, review private workshop, building department. Screening parking. Stops, development plan review. Okay, I guess we can move on to zoning.
Mhm.
All right, first one I have is number 5. Updating landscape ordinance trees protecting our canopy. That's. I don't know who put that on there, but anyone
It was,
discuss
it
it?
says carried over from
Oh,
January 23.
do we need to update our tree ordinance?
Well, right now, I mean, the tree ordinance, P and Z, basically there is a shade tree required in the front yard. But as long as we are still on septic systems, placement of a shade tree in the front yard is a challenge because those roots can destroy septic tanks and drain fields. So the question becomes, is this something we want to leave in the code as suggested and will go back to becoming required when we switch to a sewer system, or do we want to leave it as it is and let P and Z, and the property owners decide where they want to put the shade tree, what type of shade tree, because I don't believe it spells out the type of shade tree.
Can't we just look at this on a case-by-case basis? I mean, lot sizes are different. They have to,
Yeah, I guess
the engineer has to review the site plan.
Yeah, but I guess the reason is that we have an ordinance, so let's have the planning and zoning look at the actual ordinance, and maybe it should be completely stricken, or tweaked or left alone? Just let them look at it? Is that your,
Yeah, that's the idea.
Dave?
Let them Look at it.
you're on the planning and zoning one
I
now?
think when this came up, if there was no possible way to put a tree in that would compromise the septic system, then the plan was accepted as is. And when people are building to the maximum they can, it does come up. So that's with the existing rules that we had at that time, I think.
So are your opinions, should we send it to them or should we, is it good where it is or?
Personally, it seemed to work at that time. Do we need to?
But if it says you need to put a shade tree in your front yard, I think that should be reviewed. I don't know what it clearly states in there. You're saying even if it said that, you guys would work around it.
Sometimes you would accept a shade tree that was moved over to a different part of the property where it didn't cause a problem for septic or anything else.
So I think we're just saying, let's make sure that all of the ordinances and codes allow that. That it's-
Correct.
that
Common
We don't have to
sense,
rely
really,
on-
right?
That seems like a pretty simple one for
Yeah.
P and Z to
Yeah.
do.
So leave it on for them to review.
That there's a judgment element
Okay.
in there that they can, make a decision.
Correct.
All right. So that's, all right, number 10, zoning.
Mhm.
Most projects in RMM and RHM districts are non-conforming. Is this why? Can we have Corey be present for the workshop? This is from you?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I can tell the way it's written.
Thoughtfully.
Yes, got it. Sure.
Just in looking at, well, first of all, the comp plan is outdated, and that I'm assuming they're looking at that with different zoning districts. But our definitions of RMM and RHM as they were developed after a lot of the properties in those districts were already developed, and they're non-conforming.
Oh, I see.
That's
You're
why.
talking about the definitions of,
Yeah.
oh, okay. Anybody have any comments? Dave?
Mayor, council, just really a small question. I had brought this up, when we had 15 years ago, Ken Spilly is our previous town attorney, and we're fortunate that nobody has questioned it, but in this section here, the RMM 64.2E7 paragraph, it says, single-family development regulations, except as otherwise provided in this section, each single-family dwelling and its customary private accessory uses, including garages, swimming pool, tennis courts constructed in the RMM shall be subject to the property development regulations as set forth from 64-1B through 64-1J. Well, I ends at the 75% rule, but J regulates single-family development. So under this provision here, a guy can build his house in his development without regulations to the FAR or lot coverage. So I would just like for them to take a look at that, whether it's a clerk or not, that they put 64-1I, which only refers to the 75% rule, and J follows up with all the regulations and restrictions for single family regulation.
All right, so that definitely goes, to go down to the planning and zoning then.
Thank you.
Any comments? All right, and then number 16, the FAR discussion. That's zoning. Now, massing of houses and the two-story discussion that we've been having a lot of, to make two parts. Ken Khalil came up with a pretty good idea. I hope you don't mind, Ken, taking your idea. But he suggested that making, which I think actually is a pretty good idea, is that if you want more one-story houses, you have to throw those people a bone in order for them to build a one-story house. So how do you do that? Why not let the rear property line encroach farther into the setback? And then put a deed restriction on it so that you can't, in 5 years, add a second story.
yeah.
So if you want to maintain, you're maintaining your front setback, you're maintaining your side setbacks, but in the rear, you give up some of that space in the rear setback in order to have the same floor area ratio or same square footage of house that you would a two-story, then maybe you can accomplish having more one-stories built in the town.
Like the concept.
I do
Yeah.
too.
Wonder how it actually worked.
I don't know. But at least you have it, at least you've offered it.
But then you would have to change,
What?
you'd have to give them allowances on the green space and
Lot
all
coverage,
that.
and-
Like-
yeah.
Well, it all have to
Maybe.
come, all have to
Yeah.
go hand
Yeah.
in hand, but.
Right. That's fascinating.
So you're changing the setback
Yes.
behind the house.
Mhm.
The rear,
So I'm just thinking, who would have a complaint against that? And it could
Well,
be
you-
somebody who's on the lot, on the other side of the lot in question.
The
They
Charles-
might say, geez, this is just shoving right up in my face.
Well,
Just saying.
it falls under, they have to consider the neighbors and people who speak up against it.
I think as
right?
part of it, they'd have to review the
Well, that's part
35%
of what
green
planning and
space as
zoning
well.
does with their architectural review.
but if you're thinking, there's not a lot of homes that actually abut somebody's backyard. They're abut the water, they're abut another easement, they're abut an alleyway.
Well,
If you look at the map,
Douglas
They really don't.
Circle is where we saw a lot of that. When people were trying to build something new,
Wow.
and it's really difficult.
So
So I
that's,
think I like the solution.
Yeah.
At least something to look at.
Yeah. for
What else
sure.
about the FAR? Anything else?
I got my head
Let
knocked
P&G
off
look at it.
earlier on the FAR issue. I'm going to be quiet.
Yeah. All right. All right, let's move on to infrastructure. That would be before mill and pave projects factor in future road elevation requirements, mitigate standing water, improve safety during storm events. Well, okay, road elevation requirements. This is carried over from January 2030.
Right. This is basically as we move forward with doing our paving again, making sure that if there's been enough changes to elevations on a street, that we take that into consideration and perhaps raise the streets and areas where it is possible as part of those projects. I think is what the intent of this was last year.
Now, is this really something that would planning and zoning look at?
It's something that they would potentially look at when they're doing their reviews, just to, see, and then, okay, we've done reviews on all of the addresses on this street, and then trigger that as a indication to the engineer to begin planning to raise the road after those projects are finished, if necessary. So I know there's a couple of streets where there's just like one or two houses left, that if they were raised, then we could raise the cul-de-sacs and reduce some of the drainage issues that we have, different things like that.
I kind of agree with Jeff on this. I think the town manager and the town engineer should deal with this. This is a more of a town issue than a site issue.
It could fall completely under the same as the master drainage plan. I mean,
Yeah,
with both of those.
I think that would be part of that, like a sub panel. All right, so anything else on infrastructure? All right, let's go to miscellaneous. First one I have on miscellaneous is number 8, authorize P&Z and BOA members to attend remotely and fully participate in meetings.
Well, Christie alerted us that they changed the rule, correct? So you now can vote remotely.
Well, the commission can, so I don't know why we wouldn't let the.
No, previously
that-
you couldn't by state law, if I understood it correctly.
They haven't changed the state law, so what you have is you have an attorney general opinion that believes you need to have a quorum physically present whenever you're considering passing a resolution or ordinance. But they also expand that to really taking any official action. So it's not a sunshine law issue, it's more of a quorum issue in terms of whether or not someone needs to be physically present. The sunshine law issue is that if folks are appearing from some type of electronic means, that you ensure that the public has access, meaning it's audible, they can hear everybody. Then you run into a sunshine law issue. So you can do your planning and zoning board meetings, you can do your board of adjustment meetings completely virtual. The concern that I have from a legal standpoint is Board of Adjustment, all of their meetings are quasi-judicial. Planning and zoning, a large percentage of their meetings are quasi-judicial. What I would recommend is asking that the applicants for those hearings are agreeable to understanding that the entire board or majority of the board will not be physically present. Otherwise, you can do it. I think the issue from a staff perspective is one of the ability, the technology to do it effectively, and to also ensure we don't have a sunshine law issue because the audience can't hear what folks are saying from, however they're appearing electronically.
All right, so this would be an issue that you guys, the staff would look into, come back to us at a regular meeting and fill us in on if you can actually handle this type of remote process. Glenn?
That and the question being that if we allow BOA and P&Z members to attend remotely, are we then going to allow the applicants to attend remotely?
I don't see how you do it on a Board of Adjustments. They have to go to the site.
Or they have to have visited the site, but they don't go to the site during the meeting.
No, but I would think somebody goes and videos the site is not the same as somebody from Board of Adjustments actually walking the property.
Yeah, but you do that before the meeting, though.
Yeah, that's all done before the meeting.
Well, what if you've
We're just
gone
talking
for
about the
3
meeting.
months? Let's say the Board of Adjustment person has gone for 3 months and is going to rely upon Zoom. They're not going to get an accurate feel for what they're voting on.
So you'd have to really specifically point out what the conditions are for you to be.
Yeah, you've
Which
got-
we
you've got to be
talked
there to
about
do
at the
the-
last meeting, that, what were the circumstances, Christie? It wasn't because you're on vacation. It was because you physically couldn't be present.
Right, the Attorney General
Medical
recommends that you have a quorum physically present, certainly for your governing board, and that the members that attend by electronic means only attend under extraordinary circumstances. The draft that I provided for y'all would include, obviously some type of sudden illness, some type of other type of emergency, but then would allow for if there is a meeting or event out of town that conflicts with your regularly scheduled meeting.
Which wouldn't rule out if someone made the decision that they were going to be away for a family thing or whatever. So it isn't, a vacation would apply for commissioners.
And that's up to your policy decision.
I like.
As long as
I
we
like
have an in-person
the
quorum.
I like the quorum aspect myself. We can always allow the people that are on vacation, sick or whatever, to tie into it electronically, but I think the quorum is an effective tool. Ideally, we have everybody, but perhaps.
Provided we have the means to do it, because I participated last September by phone, and it was very frustrating.
Yeah, and we've had
You know,
The
situations
technology
where
is
it didn't
available
work.
today. We could upgrade the technology.
All right, so why don't we do this? This is something that wouldn't be sent down to P and Z. This is something we discussed at a regular meeting, but before you can bring it back to us, can the town, and if the town cannot do it now, how much would it cost for us to actually upgrade to do it? And then, is it something we really want to do?
Yep.
All right. Number 11, miscellaneous sign ordinance. Can we dissect our town sign ordinance and see where we need to make changes?
This I brought up because had many phone calls and concerns, specifically section 70-5, signs exempted. It's in the tab for number 11.
70-5.
Where are you?
70-5, signs exempted,
Oh, here it is.
section 4.
What page?
That's the third page in on
Yeah, it says page 51 of 320.
number 11. There's not tab?
Tab 11.
Wasn't that tab?
No.
I thought you took my book earlier.
This is what I was saying.
Tab 11.
Tab 11.
He doesn't have
I don't have
tabs.
tabs.
Steve has no tab.
I have no tabs. What page was it?
Steve's tablet.
51 of 320. Directional signs, these are signs that are exempted from the provision, from the
Next page.
There we go.
Number 4.
All right. Thank you.
displayed for the public. Small instructional signs, including those advising of private property or the like, total surface area, blah, blah, blah. Number of signs per lot and placement of each has written approval from the administrative official. So Lynn has discretion here to say, no, that's too many signs on Old Ocean, right? That's how I'm reading it. In certain locations where they've been controversial.
And still are.
Yeah.
Chrissy, that's,
Two different issues.
Mhm.
We addressed the beach signs, which is not applicable to signs on Old Ocean. It's applicable to signs on the beach. So your old sign code, which suffers from some constitutional issues, probably does need to be revamped and updated.
So can P&Z look at that?
I think so. Why not?
Okay.
Are we stuck though? Because if I remember correctly, the Supreme Court ruled that you can't dictate sign size for different elements.
There was a Supreme Court case that came out in 2015 that threw everybody's sign code into a state of disarray. What you can always do with signs is reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. So if you recall, when we did the beach sign ordinance, we limited them based on size, where they're located, and things like that, but we cannot control content. So what your regular sign code needs to address is to be brought up to that standard so that you, for example, call everything a temporary sign, whether it's an election sign, a real estate sign, or some other temporary sign you may put in your front yard. They all have to go under the category of temporary sign, because if you start deciding based on, it's an election sign, it's a real estate sign, now you're governing content. So you have to try to stay away from that based on that 2015 Supreme
So
Court.
is this something that P&Z, you need to be heavily involved with P&Z on this one?
We've updated probably about a half a dozen sign codes in the last year and a half because of that issue.
So that would be something that you would do.
Working with P&Z, because there's a lot of decisions to be made when you're reviewing a sign code.
Okay, so that's going down then as well.
Okay.
All right, last miscellaneous I have here is septic to sewer conversion.
No, also customary use,
Where? What?
number 12.
I thought we were, oh, that's right. I didn't write that one down. Miscellaneous, all right, go ahead.
So you all saw what Britt Flanagan provided. That was sent in an email by Christie. And I just want to go back over, this was apparently at the July meeting in 2021, which I listened to and read the minutes, and this wasn't, I couldn't find it, but you were both on the commission at the time, that basically gave direction. The commissioners agreed that Ocean Ridge Yacht Club had customary use, which were prescriptive rights or pre-existing rights to the public walk, which is the dune crossover continued from Fayette. And Crown Colony residents had to agree to accept these rights. So you officially decided that. And yet here we are now that they erected a gate and didn't get permission, didn't get permitting. And
Who
now
erected the gate? Fayette?
the residents of Fayette were identified on the front of this.
There were 3 residents that they.
Responsible parties, yes. And it's, classic ask for forgiveness, not permission. So they did not have
We
a
said they
permit.
could, we gave them conditions on which they could do it.
No, we did not give them. They applied for
said
a
if
permit, they were
everybody else-
denied.
No, they said, I thought we gave them, if they got everybody to agree.
If they
They
got
can
Crown
do it.
Colony to agree, and Crown Colony
And they
did
didn't.
not.
So they went ahead and did it anyway.
And the prescriptive rights are that residents of Ocean Ridge Yacht Club, I mean, having just recently shown a property in there, with the listing agent handed my client a map which showed the beach access at Fayette.
Yeah, we were talking about two different gates. The gate that we were talking about at our meeting was a gate at the end of Fayette, and they were gonna put a lock on it, not the gate on the beach.
Well, they didn't have,
Okay, so
Permit to do either
you're
one.
misconstruing what we were talking about at that meeting. We
I
were
was
not
talking
talking
about the one on
about,
the beach.
we were not talking about a beach gate. We were talking about a gate, they wanted to erect a gate on the end of Fayette where there were crosswalk starters, and they wanted to put a lock on it,
That's called
That's
the
what they
pass,
wanna do.
the pass.
a pass, and
That's
that's
the pass
where
through,
it
that
goes
path.
all the way back. It had nothing to do with the beach.
okay.
And they
But
were
likewise,
supposed, we
this
told
is
them,
the same
everybody had to
designation.
agree on it. And if they didn't agree, and now you're talking about erecting, they erected a gate on their beach walkway.
Yes,
Right, two different things. So you
just,
got to be clear when you say we're on the commission and we approve that. We did not approve that. Okay, so you're talking about a gate on the beach.
right.
Now, their gate on the beach, if you look at the property records, it's clearly delineated that that is their walkway.
They have perpetual use, not,
I know that. I have the
exclusive
paperwork,
use.
believe me. I sent it to Terry Brown, as a matter of fact. So what is it that you want somebody to look at? That's not really
if they
planning and
don't, if
zoning.
they don't have a permit, which they don't, they did not have a permit to put that up on, it's called Walk on Papa.
Okay,
They did not have a permit to do that. They would have had to have the agreement of all of Crown Colony in order to get the permit. They were denied a permit and they did it anyway.
right, but we're talking about, how is this, how are we saying this to planning and zoning? If this is an issue you want to bring up at a town meeting with discussion
Okay,
at town meeting, I got that. But at planning and zoning, how am I sending this to planning and zoning? What are they supposed to look at and change?
okay, then we need to talk about
Because-
it, I guess.
That's a different issue regarding property rights.
Okay.
Wouldn't you say?
Yes, and isn't there also an issue of who owns what?
Well, it's pretty clear on
Well-
the property, the deeds, when you read the deed. I'll send it over to you. It's literally, it shows the map. It says literally right on it.
Right, but
I mean, literally says it right on.
I don't want to get into the weeds at this meeting, but it also has tropical aid residents, and that loops into, the one that's most severely affected is Ocean Ridge Yacht Club.
That's correct.
Yes,
They got literally locked off the deck
They
they
did.
built.
and
Yeah.
chased off the beach. When, it's really the walkway and the properties abutting the walkway are also private and not,
But I believe that one of these parcels we're talking about, nobody pays taxes on. So
That's the
therefore, it's
walk.
an ownership
Yeah, that's-
question.
that's the walk.
So that's not a
Piece.
planning and zoning thing.
Okay,
So go ahead and put that on an agenda item.
okay.
Good luck.
And then
Maybe
I just
July.
want to get a feel from the commission on customary use, as it has been brought to our attention a number of times by Tropical Drive residents and their inability to enjoy the dry sand. And my understanding in talking to Christie and talking to the attorney for the League of Cities is that you need to have a judicial declaration to, I guess, enforce or recognize customary use. And I just wanted to understand, and have all of us understand what is involved in obtaining such a judicial declaration.
Well, there's two ways you can pursue it. There's a statutory process that you can follow as the town. And what it essentially requires is that the town would have to identify whether it's the entire coast within the town or whether it's specific property that you are going to go after to determine it as customary use to allow the public to utilize it. Now, in order to do that type of action, you obviously have to name each property owner that may own private property where you're trying to establish customary use. So for an example, Turtle Beach condominium, they own, their property line actually extends out to the water. So if you wanted to establish customary use under the statutory process, you would have to file an action in circuit court against the condominium association and come forward with evidence that shows that the public has historically, anciently utilized their dry sand area for public recreation. If you could establish that in a court of law, then the court can grant the public customary use of that area. It's not a specific, meets and bounds defined area, it's a general area to establish that. But it would require the town to name each property owner that you're seeking to file a lawsuit against in that lawsuit. So unfortunately, the statute pits the town against private property owners. And then has a judge decide who's right. Because the state of Florida has not determined there's customary use all along the Florida coast, so the dry sand area is always an issue and contention right now in the state of Florida.
So what do you think the chance of litigating in favor of the town against the property holder is?
There was a recent case, it was Reddington Beach versus a private homeowner, and the town did prevail in that.
Well, Reddington was a little bit of a different scenario because they did already have an ordinance in place, but I don't know that anyone is necessarily going to win in that type of litigation except for the attorneys.
Sounds like it.
As far as establishing customary use, is that as simple as getting affidavits?
No, because it will require trial. You're gonna have to go before a judge at least, or the statutory process isn't clear whether it's a jury trial. I think it's set it up that it might be judge alone, but you are gonna have to go in front of a judge and bring forth witnesses who will then be cross-examined, because if you just use affidavits, you can't cross-examine an affidavit. So you're talking about an actual trial.
So to establish customary use, X number of residents would be called up on court and the judge would believe them, and then they'd also have paperwork or family photos that show the blah, blah, blah.
Right, the more evidence you have to establish a customary use is what you want to bring forward.
Okay. So the question, I guess, is it could either be a private matter or the town gets involved, it becomes a public matter.
Right, there's two separate ways. Under the common law, individuals could claim that there's customary use. Under the statutory process, it would require the town. The town's the only one that can come forward in that type of litigation.
That's a big question. So, and can you isolate to one property, or once you make that precedent, does it then flow across town?
You would have to name every private property interest that's involved in the area that you would want to determine as customary use. So if it touched on 3 or 4 property owners, you would have to name all those properties owners in the litigation.
So for instance, in the particular property that we appear to be discussing, to the north of Turtle Beach, that would affect that homeowner as well? That person would be dragged into this?
Potentially, I'm not familiar with where their property boundary is. As you know, if you look at property appraiser, the property lines are jagged at the ocean. So it would really depend on whose property you're touching. But since customary use isn't a defined geographical area, it's more of a broad area, you would then probably have to just name everybody just to be safe. You don't actually limit yourself in being able to establish your customary use area.
And would those rules of court that you just explained apply to whether the towns are involved or just residents were involved?
If a resident's involved and they want to establish.
The residents to resident versus town.
Right, if they want to establish customary use, they would have to name the property owner, just like the town would. Same thing for a prescriptive easement. Prescriptive easement is a little bit harder to establish, but it is limited to a specific physical area, meets and bounds area.
Okay, well, that's definitely not going to P and Z. So,
No?
Can I say something?
so if you want to bring that up in another commission meeting, we can. All right, so last one on my list here is septic to sewer conversion under miscellaneous. So,
I think that there is interest in reestablishing a committee, maybe not a septic sewer committee, but a task force that wouldn't be sanctioned by the commission in looking at this
So
further.
this isn't part of P and Z, this is totally separate.
yeah, this would be nothing you're going to send down to P and Z. So this would be another, something to bring up at a regular meeting.
That kind of fun, various entities.
So everybody on the same page with that?
Yeah.
All right. Is that everybody's list? Okay, public comment. Whoever wants to be first.
One second before we get to that, what did we decide on the architectural review?
We're going to do that at a regular meeting. and
It's going to be a
discuss it.
regular meeting now.
Yeah, because it went so deep into the,
Christopher Curry, 27 Tropical Drive.
hit the button, Chris.
Sorry. Chris Curry, 27 Tropical Drive. Roughly a month ago, I sent to each of you town commissioners, as well as copies to the town attorney, the town manager, town chief of police, a number of issues related to this customary use doctrine applying to specifically, as far as we're concerned at this point in time, 2 properties at the end of Tropical Drive. There seems to be some confusion here, and I want to make sure that I am, that we're all on the same page here, okay? It is my understanding that customary use is a matter involving the public. Unlike a prescriptive easement, it does not involve 2 specific property owners. The only property owner involved in the customary use action whereby a judicial determination or affirmation is obtained acknowledging that the customary use conditions not only apply on these properties, but have applied since the beginning of time, which is the case here, okay? This is not an issue between the property owners on Tropical Drive or Hersey Drive or Douglas Drive or Ocean View, okay? It is between the town and those property owners who are attempting to deny the public's right to access to that dry sand area. Certainly, just to give you an idea of scale, there are in fact 69 properties in, but if you just take the south 4 streets, which would be Douglas, Ocean View, Tropical, and Hersey, there are 69 non-beachfront property owners, most of which are multifamily and have multiple residents on them. So we are probably talking about, I'm just going to guess, at 200 to 300 people just on those 4 streets, okay, that have been using that beach since the beginning of time. I personally have been here, I'm into my 52nd year of residing at Tropical Drive, and I used, and my family have been using that beach that entire time. But my point here is that this has got to be resolved by the town and the property owners in question. It is not a civil issue between property owner and property owner.
Thank you.
That is my understanding. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Greg Van Vliet, 17 Tropical Drive. Okay, one of the issues, you had drainage on there. About 3 years ago, I believe, I submitted a petition from the property owners that are hurt by the flooding financially. When our drainage system, the town's drainage system that according to the town engineer is about 77 hectares, 190 acres or so. When the power goes out FPL and the backup, we flood. That's a clear and simple of it. So the flooding is caused by the town because of their infrastructure, the drainage infrastructure where all the water goes to. And it only takes about an inch. I did the math one time and turned that into. And I question, has that been addressed at all? Is that anything forthcoming to look to, per my suggestion, put back up to stop when the power goes off, shut the pipes off so we don't get the drainage coming down there for even temporary.
No, we haven't addressed, what we did address is replacing that generator, for a
Right.
brand new one in there. And then we replaced all the infrastructure inside, all the wiring, when, on that whole, where Henry's is, we replaced all that area, all that infrastructure there. Pipe wise, we haven't addressed that.
So that doesn't address the flooding. When it fails, which it will again in the future, like it did twice back in 17, we're going to flood. You know, I contemplated getting an electrical vehicle.
But maybe I'm
It would be
misremembering,
totaled.
didn't we, 2 years ago, since you've been here, we've added an additional backup new generator down there that would kick in.
There's two. There's one
Right.
there at Henry's and there's one right at the corner.
Right.
Yeah.
Like we,
By the end of this fiscal year, all of the generators at Woolbright, Tropical, Coconut, will all have either been replaced or upgraded. All right, now there is a temporary generator at Tropical. As we've pulled the old one, they're going to pour a small additional concrete and then replace that. And the one that was pulled has been sent out to be rehabbed for Coconut, and we have a new generator that
no, I'm just worried about Tropical right now.
Right.
But, because I think we confused backup with generator. So at Tropical, you're pouring a pad that will have a backup generator.
A new generator.
It'll have a
A new-
brand new generator,
But the
Brand
old generator is then being
Refurbished.
refurbished to be the backup generator?
No, to go to Coconut.
So back to the question being asked here.
But on
The
one,
I remember this whole
generator is the
discussion, there
backup
was
system.
gonna be a backup system on Tropical. I thought we had.
The
installed it.
generator is the backup system. The system is connected to FPNL power.
Yeah.
And when FPNL power fails, then the generator kicks in. That's the backup system.
So go ahead. Wes.
And when the backup fails, we flood. That's the problem. There's nothing put in place, you weren't around here, Bob, to stop the flow of the water. That can be done completed by putting some valves, some automatic valves to shut the water off until we get the power back on, or even, we still have the old generator, the diesel generator to come down, hook it up to prevent the flooding. An individual just bought the property right on top of the generators. And he may be subject to doing a tear down, elevating the property, which is even worse than the problem. But I have concern about that. And, you know, back in 17, had a brand new vehicle and it lost about $7,000 worth of its power, value when it flooded. And numerous, and I've had a Mercedes, total. So that we need to look at. My second item, then there was a RMM zoning. You had that on the list there because the way that was changed, and I don't know when it was changed, and I've lived there for almost 40 years. Now most of the properties are non-conforming, 100 by 100 lot, and one section states that you can't build a duplex anymore. And I see ambiguous statement too. In one spot it says 12,500 for multifamily. The other spot is showing 10,000 square foot. If you go back, the next item E, it says 100 by 100, that's 10,000 square foot. So you've got ambiguous statement in that part too.
thank you.
And the other thing is notifications. 300-foot notice for when there's going to be changes, property change and stuff is inadequate. That people three properties down won't even know if there are changes being made. That should be increased to at least 1,000 foot. And the last item is parking. You brought that up too. Parking on Tropical is almost to the point that it's a safety factor when they put vehicles in. And if you have construction, you can't get any by. As it is, you can only drive one vehicle down and you have to wait for people on the other end. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
See how patiently I waited? Terry Brown, Harvard Mass Stop. This will probably give Christie a headache. But I'm going to go revisit the 50% rule on substantial improvement. And it does apply to property outside flood zones, right? It's just, you look at it differently. When it's in a flood zone, you got to bring the elevation up. Whatever the new base elevation is, does anyone know what it is? They haven't decided.
No.
The property I talked about the other night is not in a flood zone. It's up on the dune, and they applied the 50% rule and made him go and get another appraisal so it would exceed that value. And the permit got approved after a year. They were only doing the roof, the windows, and stuccoing the outside of that property, the Adams house. So the other headache I wanted to point out is that one of my neighbors is part of the way in AE and part not in AE. So does he have to apply by the whole rule? If he does anything that exceeds the 50%, does he have to tear the whole structure down and start over? Or is there going to be, as Steve pointed out, some kind of waiver for what he needs to do, as long as he doesn't add a section? He's a little bit encroaching onto the side setback, and he's asking me, do I care? I said, I don't care. I mean, that's a variance issue.
Yeah, it's a variance request.
Yeah, but he needs new roof, he needs new windows, so would that count towards the 50% if he's not in the flood zone?
I don't know, that's a question for the planning and zoning. I think about it, right?
Building official.
It's which half of the house he renovates.
Yeah.
No, he's right at the edge, what part of it is and part of it isn't. I'm in it. By the way, you read your renewal policy for premium for flood policy. You will have a shock.
Anyone else?
Yes, sir. Mark D. Baptiste, 3 Ocean Harbor Circle, Ocean Ridge. Approximately five months ago, we had an applicant for our HOA who wanted to redo the roof. And the aesthetic of that roof was not in keeping with the Architectural Control Board and the HOA's requirements. They were denied. A permit was issued by the town in spite of that for a new roof, although we had written acknowledgement that it was denied. We asked why the permit was issued when we denied it, and we were told that the town couldn't possibly know all the different HOAs within the town, and therefore did not check. So we've always had approvals for anything that's done on the exterior of a home within our community. And the town has always found their way to review that. And if it was approved, it was approved as part of the permit. If it was denied, a permit was not issued. In this case, it was. So we just want to make sure going forward, because it's kind of a waste of the HOA bylaws to have gone through the process to possibly have someone put up a roof that was totally inconsistent with what we require. So I bring that to your attention so that perhaps in the future we don't run into this problem.
You know, we should have that, because we have, 2 gated communities in town, Pelican Cove and
Well,
Ocean.
also
Ocean
Yacht
Harbor
Club.
Estates.
Yeah,
Yacht Club.
We have
So they
since
should-
changed that.
it should what's that?
We have since changed that because at the time we
Do you have-
didn't know there was homes. We were only told that the condos had the HOA.
So you have changed
So we
that.
have changed the application. Now we ask everybody to identify whether or not they're an HOA.
Does your HOA have a penalty for doing that?
I guess we could pursue a lawsuit, but that's the only penalty I'm aware of.
Well,
Other than ostracizing your neighbor.
No, they put up a roof that was consistent ultimately, but
Oh,
the point is that
okay.
if they could have put up a roof that was totally inconsistent. Thank you for the change.
Thanks,
All
Mark.
right.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
You know, I couldn't help myself. Christina Hassett, 29 Staple Highland Drive. Number one, you guys covered so much. I thought like Christy said, we'd be here till 6 p.m. But you were able to go through a lot of stuff. I didn't appreciate the spitballing. It made it very difficult to follow. But I'm glad that you tabled number 2. I think it warrants a much larger discussion and a lot more public input. And along with that, I think number 16, the FAR discussion probably needs to be added into that. Gulfstream actually has gone quite far in encouraging one-story houses, and what they did was they allowed a larger FAR for a one-story new construction. So it's not a brand new idea, so I mean, I think you should probably tap in and looking at what they're doing. But that has to be done in conjunction with outdoor spaces and setbacks. It can't be done in a vacuum. And I think that there's actually quite a few homes within our township that we do have back-to-back homes. I think that's actually probably more of the majority on single families, but I don't know that. I mean, but I really think that that has to be something that has to be investigated by staff and really delineated. So are you talking about 10% of the town, 50% of the town? Who knows? But that would be my suggestion, and I would tie those two very closely together. The only other question, and I guess it's more of a question, I understand that our comprehensive plan in regards to RMM and RHM are inconsistent. That happens in all towns. My concern is I wouldn't go and change any of that because you've got an RHM building coming up in the north end of town with the Ocean Club, and any changes that you make to this to try to bring everybody, you'll never get every house in compliance. You just won't. That's just how towns develop, how ordinances change. But I would be really cautious about making any changes to those definitions with that. We've got our first multifamily construction coming up. So, but I really believe that it needs to live under the existing rules that we have. And I think that they're willing to do that anyway, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right, thank you everybody for coming and great job. Meeting adjourned.